Tonight on PBS News Weekend, we check in on the Pennsylvania races that could help decide control of the White House and Congress. Then, what's behind the recent rise in executions in America after years of decline? And election officials reflect on the threats and the stress they've faced since the 2020 election.
We have faith that we're doing a really good job, and we do things in a bipartisan team and we work so well together. And then you have someone saying, don't have faith in that.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. Hopes are dimming tonight that the killing of the leader of Hamas would build momentum for a ceasefire as Israel presses its air campaign in Lebanon and Gaza. In Lebanon, an IDF strike on the Christian-majority city of Junia, which is north of Beirut, left 2 people dead. It was the first Israeli assault in that area. And in Gaza, a series of strikes on refugee camps and hospitals over 24 hours has killed more than 50 people. Health officials say 11 of the dead, including 3 children, were from a single family. Survivors say there's nowhere for them to go.
Our home is gone, my family's home. It completely collapsed, and now we're living in this. We have no other place to stay.
In northern Israel, a drone targeted one of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's homes. The Israeli military says it was launched from Lebanon, and Iran says Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy, is responsible for the attack. Netanyahu and his wife were not home at the time, and no one was hurt. To the north in Kiryat Atta, an Israeli man was killed and several others injured when Hezbollah rockets hit cars and buildings. Striking Boeing workers are to vote next week on a proposed new contract. The deal would give a 35% pay raise over 4 years, plus additional retirement fund contributions. A month-long strike has stopped production of the 737 MAX, which is one of Boeing's best-selling passenger jets. On the campaign trail, former President Trump says if he's returned to the White House, he'd fight for American workers. At a rally in Detroit Friday night, Trump vowed to bring manufacturing jobs back to the city.
I will protect our workers, I will protect our jobs, and I will protect our borders, I will protect our families, and I will protect the birthright of our children to live in the richest and most powerful nation on the face of the earth.
And Vice President Harris was in Detroit today, highlighting what she says is Trump's increasing instability.
Donald Trump has proven himself to be increasingly unstable and unfit, and he's trying to take us backward. He is someone who demeans the American people, who has no actual plan for uplifting the middle class.
This evening, Harris is in Atlanta for a Get Out the Vote rally, and Trump holds a rally in Pennsylvania outside Pittsburgh. And in Cuba, the power grid collapsed for a second time today, shortly after officials said service was being restored from Friday's blackout. Government officials blame deteriorating infrastructure, fuel shortages, and rising demand for electricity for what's considered the worst blackout since Hurricane Ian 3 years ago. There are reports that power is again being restored. To make matters worse, newly formed Hurricane Oscar is expected to bring heavy rain and strong winds to the island throughout the weekend. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, questions about how capital punishment is being applied in America. And election officials talk about their growing concerns about safety.
This is PBS News Weekend from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
This fall, Pennsylvania is living up to its nickname as the Keystone State. Both the Harris and Trump presidential campaigns see its 19 electoral votes as key to getting to the 270 needed to win. In addition, Pennsylvania contest could determine control of Capitol Hill. So it's where we begin our check-ins on battleground states in the final 3 weekends of the race. Julia Taruso is national political reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Julia, let's start by just telling me what's the state of the race now in Pennsylvania? How do things feel with a little about 2.5 weeks to go?
The state of the race is neck and neck in Pennsylvania. You see that in polling with a tied race here, anywhere between 1 and 4 points separating Trump and Harris. And then you also just feel it in terms of the amount of time both candidates are spending in this state. Both of them and their running mates were here in the past week, along with surrogates, just kind of blanketing the Commonwealth.
In those visits, are they focusing on different parts of the state, and sort of how does that fit in with the political geography of Pennsylvania?
Sure. So I think former President Trump's strategy had been to focus really on a lot of those Rust Belt, white working class parts of the state that really helped carry him to victory in 2016. Vice President Harris had been focusing on the suburbs, Philadelphia, but then also traveling to a lot of the areas where President Biden was able to do a little bit better than Hillary Clinton in 2020 and win. You know, those collar counties represent about 30% of the voting population in the state. And so I think you're seeing both Harris double down there and former President Trump trying to, lose by less in some of those Democratic suburban areas where there are just a lot of voters.
We've got a little bit of sound from 2 Pennsylvania voters I'd like to play for you.
The MAGA movement has veered away from Republicans and become a totally extreme group. I've maintained my Republican stature, but I can't support a movement that just doesn't stand for human decency.
I was happy when he was president because we could live better. Taxes were lower, food was lower, gas was lower. I could afford to live better. He made me happy.
Julie, as you talk to voters around the state, what are they telling you is on their minds as they try to decide their vote?
I think those 2 voters you just illustrated are very representative of what I hear. The number one issue in Pennsylvania is the economy, but when you talk to voters about what's motivating their vote, supporters of former President Trump say the economy, they say immigration and the border. Supporters of Vice President Harris say really the threat of another Donald Trump presidency to them, their fears about what would happen to abortion rights and kind of other democratic freedoms is a lot of what I hear from, folks supporting Harris.
And of course, there's an important Senate race in Pennsylvania. Democratic Senator Bob Casey running for re-election against hedge fund businessman named David McCormick. Tell us about that race.
Senator Casey is a well-known senator in the state. And up until about August, he was leading in this race by about 8 percentage points. It was looking pretty good for him. But Dave McCormick has run a very strong campaign here. He's narrowed the gap to about 4 or 5 percentage points. I think you see Casey getting a little bit nervous. He recently came out with an ad in which he touts having bucked Biden on a fracking decision that the president made. And he touts siding with Trump on putting tariffs on China. So that shows you that a Democrat who is also a very close ally of Joe Biden sees the political advantage of indicating to potential split ticket voters that there's a home for him, with them.
And also with the battle for the control of the House, there are 3 House races in Pennsylvania that are considered toss-ups. Tell us about each one of those.
First, you have 2 Democrats who are hoping to hold on to their seats. There's Susan Wild facing Republican State Representative Ryan McKenzie. That's in the Lehigh Valley, which is a battleground part of Pennsylvania. Wild only won that seat by less than 2 percentage points in 2020. So I think it's a place where Republicans are really hoping they might be able to pick up a seat. It's an area where the Latino population is growing. It's one of the largest Latino populations in the state, but it's also a district that Biden did win by more than 4 percentage points in 2020. The second Democrat is Congressman Matt Cartwright, who represents the northeast portion of Pennsylvania. That's a district that actually Trump won in 2016 and in 2020. So he's managed to hold on in this plus Trump district for the last number of cycles, really by running very local races, kind of focusing on being a moderate. His challenger is a man named Rob Bresnahan, who has been a prolific fundraiser, and that's actually a race that where you see the most money spent in the state. And then finally, in the south central part of Pennsylvania, it's where Harrisburg is, York County, you have Republican Congressman Scott Perry. Perry has been a longtime Trump ally. He was investigated by the FBI for his role in trying to overturn the election results in Pennsylvania here. So I think there was a lot of thought among Democrats that he might be vulnerable the last time he ran. This time, a popular former news anchor, Janelle Stelzen, is running against him, and she has massively outraised him in that race. So she actually had a lead. It looks like it's narrowed. Definitely the three to watch in Pennsylvania.
Julia Taruso, the Philadelphia Inquirer, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
While the execution of a Texas man was temporarily put on hold this week, more than 2,000 inmates remain on death rows across the country. The Texas case has highlighted a recent increase in executions and questions about how capital punishment is applied in America. Ali Rogan has more.
Since the death penalty was reinstated in the 70s and late 80s on the federal level, some 1,600 people have been executed in the U.S. This week, Alabama executed Derek Dearman, responsible for killing 5 people in 2016. Dearman had dropped his appeal and asked to be put to death. This follows 5 executions in the U.S. in the span of a week in September. More executions are set to take place before the end of the year in Alabama and at least 5 other states. Maurice Chammah is a staff writer for the Marshall Project, a journalism nonprofit focused on criminal justice issues. He's been covering the death penalty for over a decade and is the author of the book, Let the Lord Sort Them. Maurice, thank you so much for joining us. What is behind the rise in the number of executions that are being carried out?
There's no one reason. There's kind of a bunch of factors. I mean, the Supreme Court is very conservative and is so less likely to stop executions than they used to be. And then you have a lot of Republican state governors and attorneys general who see that it's kind of politically advantageous to pursue executions, especially at a time when former President Donald Trump is running for office and the death penalty was a favorite of his as well.
One of the more high-profile cases right now is that of Robert Roberson in Texas. On Thursday, his execution was temporarily paused by the state Supreme Court. Can you tell us about this case and why it's causing some to question what's legally taken into account in these execution cases?
Yeah, it's a really shocking and unprecedented situation. Next week, state legislators here in Texas want to bring him to the state capitol to testify. They issued a subpoena for him sort of as a 11th hour play to try to stop the execution. They're concerned essentially that the courts did not adequately look at new medical findings in his case. He would be the first person executed under the theory of shaken baby syndrome, but many now question whether he really killed his daughter or whether her death was an accident. He's maintained his innocence for more than 20 years. The case has become a real reckoning over whether the courts are sort of up to the task when the science changes in a case and whether there's this risk of executing an innocent person. I'll also add that a lot of his supporters are Republicans. It's been a kind of bipartisan effort on the state legislators' part here to step in when they feel like the governor and the state's courts have sort of abdicated their responsibility.
What about the methods used in executions? Have those changed over the years, and how has that affected the number of executions that take place?
This is another reason why executions seem to be going up. So about 10, 15 years ago, pharmaceutical companies stopped allowing their drugs to be used in executions. This led to a frenzy among many different states trying to source new combinations of drugs and lots of litigation. So now some states are looking to fentanyl and ketamine, and then even beyond lethal injection to the firing squad and also to the electric chair. And Alabama recently pioneered the use of nitrogen gas.
There's another high-profile case, that of Richard Moore of South Carolina. He's set to be executed on November 1st. What is different about his case, and why is it drawing more attention than other cases?
While Richard Moore was given the option of how he would choose to be executed between electric chair, lethal injection, and firing squad, he ended up picking lethal injection, but it stands to reason that at any point someone in South Carolina could choose the firing squad, which hasn't been used in more than a decade in the US. It's very rare, and I think will set off a lot of attention and scrutiny in that state. Richard Moore himself has also been calling attention to some of the racial dynamics in his case, the fact that there were no Black members of his jury, and that the crime that he committed, the murder of a convenience store clerk, was by his own reckoning severe, but not, sort of what we would consider the worst of the worst, that there are kind of racial dynamics and geographic dynamics dictating why he's getting executed and others aren't.
And let's talk more broadly about that factor of race. How does race tend to factor into who is and who isn't executed? And what does that say about longstanding issues with the capital punishment system?
Well, death rows across the country are disproportionately Black, and the numbers are even more out of whack when you look at the race of victims in capital cases. So regardless of the race of the perpetrator, if the victim is white, it is more likely to lead to a death sentence. But beyond these racial disparities, whether someone gets the death penalty seems to have more to do with what county they committed the crime in, who happens to be the district attorney, whether the state leaders are really actively interested in pursuing executions or not, and really in the context of all of the murders that take place in the United States in any given year, the number of people who are sentenced to death and then executed is just a vanishingly small number. And when you get really into the weeds of why it's those people, it can feel quite random.
We are just a few weeks away from the November election. What are the policy differences between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris on this issue?
So Trump oversaw more executions than any president in decades in terms of federal executions, and he has mused about bringing back guillotines and firing squads and group executions. Many of these things are outside of the purview of the president and are extremely unlikely, but they suggest a certain appetite for capital punishment. President Biden campaigned 4 years ago on a promise to work against the death penalty, work to abolish it. He has not done a whole lot on that front. And in fact, the Democratic Party dropped the death penalty, opposition to it, from their platform this year, which suggests that really the ball would be in President Kamala Harris's administration. It would be in her court to really decide. As a prosecutor in California, there were times when she really opposed the death penalty and other times when she kind of sped appeals along towards execution. So it's really anyone's guess what she would do with that power.
Maurice Chammah with the Marshall Project. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
With about 2.5 weeks to go until Election Day, some places around the country are still looking for people to work at polling places. One reason for that could be the threats and harassment that's been aimed at election officials since the false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. Tonight, we hear from current and former election officials across the country. This report is from our partners at News 21. That's a national student reporting initiative based at Arizona State University's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism.
Tuesday, 7:11 p.m. Hi, Tina Barton. This is Pissed Off Patriots of America. Guess what? You're going to pay for it. You will pay for it. You should be imprisoned, if not the least bit. You should be executed under federal prison. We will take you out, your family, your life, and you deserve the throat to the knife. Watch your back, you silly. Watch your back.
So when I first got that message, it was the Tuesday after the November general election. Obviously walking into the office completely exhausted, and then saw that the light was flashing on my phone and listened to the voicemail. It's not something that any election official signs up for. And it's unfortunate that it is a burden that a lot of us are bearing in this field.
We had a gentleman that liked to come into the office just to question what we did loudly or cause an issue. He would stand at ball games and just stare at me or try to make me uncomfortable when I'd go watch my nephew play basketball. The accumulation of all of that ended up in 2020 on Election Day when he was yelling at my poll workers, and it kind of turned into a circus throughout the day. He turned me into the state, showed up at our board meeting, and I told the board, I said, this is something I'll finish this election, but this is something I really need to think about if it's worth the mental drain of trying to defend yourself all the time.
I think being from a small town, people are just, they know what they know, and they're really not willing to be educated or hear any other type of point of view. It's a difficult place to be in when you have such nonsense being spread kind of on the national level. And then it comes down to us where we have faith that we're doing a really good job, and we're we do things in a bipartisan team and we work so well together. And then you have someone saying, don't have faith in that.
I think here in Georgia, people have a lot of opinions about elections, right? Whenever I meet someone, normally I don't tell them what I do right away. And then if they ask, I'll answer. And then they'll say, oh, you work in politics. I said, no, I don't work in politics. My job is to administer and grade the test. That's it. I was accosted by someone for where I work. I stupidly was wearing my county rain jacket, and she was very kind, and then she saw my jacket and just kind of launched into this. The election was stolen, you don't count my votes, I know my ballot's not counted. For a long time, Cobb was a Republican stronghold in Georgia, right? And then people who've lived here their whole lives, they feel like all of a sudden, Cobb became blue. And that was in 2020. How could this place I've lived in my whole life all of a sudden be blue? Something must be going on. And I think that it's really fear. This fear that the place that they've known their whole lives has changed. I'll have conversations for an hour with voters. I'll bring them back here in my office. I'll sit down with them. I'll show them tapes and paperwork and everything you could think of. And they'll stand up and they'll shake my hand and they'll say, thanks for your time, but I still don't believe you. When half of the country doesn't believe in the foundation of our democracy, I don't know what's next, and it scares me to think about that. When I talk to people about the 2020 election, I always make the distinction between the election itself in November, which went very, very smoothly. It was only the results of the election and the aftermath that really kind of blew up. I got a call from a friend in Washington, D.C. who told me that I had appeared on the dark web and that I'd been doxxed and that they put my home address, picture of me, contact information and stuff like that, saying that I was going to be killed because I had not verified absentee ballots or something. And, they said to, every time you leave your house, make sure you tell your family goodbye because you're not going to see them again. Maricopa County, the elections process was a very sleepy, quiet, one-day event for the most part. What we saw in 2020 was obviously something that really shook us and our community. I mean, obviously, a lot more security measures taking place with fencing, but we do additional measures. You'll see everything from the roadway to the sidewalks to the parking lot fortified, and I hate to say that and use that, but that's the reality. And our number one job there is to make sure that they're safe and that they can carry out the process that needs to be done.
I'm just disgusted by people like you. You're a joke.
I'm sorry, I do not tolerate that kind of language. If you would like to talk to me in a civil, I'm hanging up.
I've been at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for 16 years, where I've gotten letters to me. Actually, it was a letter to my wife, but it came to the office saying that this person was going to kill our fourth child, and they named him. So my phone rang, and I was told go upstairs to sit in the county attorney's office. The FBI is there, and they need to talk to me. And they had two very specific threats to me and to my children that they had gotten on the internet. And they put armed guards on my house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is what they give you when the FBI tells you you better wear body armor and you better carry a firearm.
I've built this team. I've built a very resilient and strong team. However, I am having some team members leave because this work is hard. In the last 6 months, I've lost 8 people that have had out of 21. That's a third of my staff say this is too much, I cannot do this any longer. That's a lot. Before 2018, it was a lot of fun. The process was fun. We really enjoyed seeing people. Election day was a great day. Post-election in 2020, we saw a huge shift in how we were being treated. We completed an election during a pandemic and ensured that everybody had the right to vote with the record numbers, the highest number of voters that we've ever had, the highest number of ballots we've ever counted in Shasta County, and we did that very quickly and efficiently. And instead of getting celebrated, we're getting yelled at because of the voting system we used. People were angry because we handed up Sharpies on election day. And then post-election, they heard a rumor that Sharpies were bad and they shouldn't have used Sharpies, so they didn't think their vote was counted. Without understanding the big picture and having all the pieces in front of them, they're making assumptions based on what they believe instead of understanding that election administration is a very complex task.
There has been a dehumanization of those in the elections world. I think that for a lot of people, they're angry at government. They're angry at all things elections.
The truth is we have secure elections. The truth is we have accurate elections.
The election officials across the country are amazing. Everyone wants to do it right.
Yes, it's hard right now. Yes, I'm probably the most stressed I've ever been in my life, but I still come to work smiling every day because there's joy throughout every single day, even when it's hard.
And that is PBS News Weekend for this Saturday. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.